Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. I'm TCaptainX. We are going to go through what is the new meta after the Season 5 Reloaded update in Warzone, because there is a very good amount of weapon balancing changes, and I think the meta is actually going to be in a pretty solid spot here. So I'm going to go through what changed, and then we'll kind of tier list and rank everything, and then I'll get into loadouts here. So first of all, we do have that new PPSH helical magazine attachment. It's not worth using, unfortunately, because it has about 200 rounds in the magazine, but once you go through it, you have zero way of reloading it. Like, you literally cannot reload it. You have to drop the gun and get a new gun altogether to essentially reload it after those 200 rounds. The ABR got a close to mid-range damage nerf along with bullet velocity and ADS speed penalties. AK got a mid-range buff along with some other multiplier buffs. Recoil springs got a buff as well, so a little bit better recoil control. AMAX got arm multiplier buff, ADS and sprint fire buffs. Cypher got a nerf at its long range damage. It's not going to hit nearly as hard, along with a bit of an ADS penalty. The Kilo got huge range buffs, like massive range buffs. They've really extended those ranges out, along with handling buffs, and then a small nerf to Mag 3, taking it from 80 down to 70 rounds. The XM4 got some pretty solid range buffs as well, and some multiplier buffs. It's not going to quite be meta, but it will make it a lot more viable. And then going into SMGs, the C9 got a mid-range nerf. So the second damage range, it will do less damage, along with a small ADS nerf. Jackal got a range buff along with handling buffs and then a buff to its recoil springs. Kompakt got a nice range buff and especially nice damage buff in its second damage range, along with handling buffs and recoil springs. This is going to be a really interesting that we'll talk about a little bit later. KSV got a range buff and some handling buffs. The Saug range buffs, handling buff, also a buff to its recoil springs. And the only sniper that got changes was the Frostline got a flinch resistance buff and a bullet velocity buff. Okay, so to make this easy for you guys, I've kind of broken this down, and we also have this TTK chart. This is an average TTK chart, courtesy of my mod, Harry. Thank you for putting this together, Harry. If you guys see him in chat, please send him virtual McDonald's and Taco Bell. He'll love you forever. So when it comes to the ARs, Kilo and ABR are really going to be kind of 1A and 1B sort of thing. The Kilo is going to be just the best all-around AR, period, because its mid-range TTK is so good. On rebirth, Kilo is going to be probably the clear #1, but the ABR, they didn't touch it at long range. So the long range TTK is still insanely good, and it has super low recoil still. So for verdansk, or for more like an anchor roll on rebirth, the ABR will still be fantastic to use. You're just not going to be able to two burst with it really anymore up close is the big penalty. So you kind of have to pick between these two guns. Do you want it to kind of be good all around, especially close to mid range, or do you want it to be really good at long range? So I really like the way they've kind of balanced these two guns. Now, after that, there is a bit of a drop off between everything else. There are a lot of other options that are solid, especially on rebirth. FFAR, AMAX do have really solid TTKs, but more recoil. The Cypher kind of fell off. I don't think it's quite as much worth using anymore after its nerf. AMES and GPR are still nice as well. Now, the SMG meta, I think, is actually balanced even better, though, because we have even more than just two options here. The C9, the big thing that happened with it was its second damage range, the time to kill is much slower. So you'll see in that second damage range, it's a lot slower compared to the Ladra or the Kompakt. The Kompakt, its TTKs are the fastest all around. It's got the best close range, and its mid-range TTK is also very solid. Range got a nice buff. But most importantly, because they buffed the recoil springs, if we use that in the right build, we can make this the recoil very manageable on it, and the Kompakt feels so much better now. So the Kompakt, I think, could rise to the top, but the C9, it's still going to be overall great. It's still going to be just like the classic easy SMG to use, great iron sights, low recoil. And then the Ladra, it kind of like falls in between these two. A little bit better than the C9, definitely better mid-range, but maybe a little bit more recoil. So any of these three are going to be fantastic options. Now, the Saug, I do think is kind of a sleeper pick. If you build it right, you can get the recoil really low if you build up on the recoil springs. This is a gun, both the Saug and the Jackal have the ability to get much faster TTKs in this if you hit chest shots only. As long as you don't hit any stomach or leg shots, you can get some really fast TTKs, but if you miss those, you can get a much slower one. So these guns are kind of like higher risk, higher reward type guns, maybe for a really highly skilled player. KSV, good option, really good range. PPSH, decent, but it has bad handling and movement the way the stock is built because there's no rear grip attachment. LC10, it's meh, it's still okay, but not quite what it used to be. Similar story to the Saug and Jackal, can get a fast TTK, but as soon as you hit one bullet off the chest, the TTK drops significantly. And then the TR2 conversion is interesting. It can have some really nice TTKs, but it has a variable fire rate. That fire rate slows down the longer you're on the trigger. So these TTKs are not always going to be achievable the longer you're on the trigger. So to make this even easier, I've done a tier list here just to go through really quickly. As far as SMGs, Ladra, C9, and Kompakt are going to be our top 3 options, but the Saug and Jackal are definitely going to be worth using as well and are kind of right there in the mix. ARs, it really comes down to the Kilo and ABR, kind of depending on which map you're playing, the role that you play, but I think Kilo's overall #1. Sniper supports, we have a few options here. ASVAL, GPR, FFAR, all really good options. The full auto AUG with rapid fire is decent as well, but they did nerf the handing a little bit, so I left that one off. For snipers, again, a lot of options. AMR mod, super underrated. Frostline got a buff. HER is still good, but not as powerful as it used to be. LR762 is underrated. Kar 98, of course, is really solid for rebirth only. LMGs are still just, they need some love, but the XMG on Verdansk is very low recoil and does have very good long range TTKs, so it's worth using if you want to mess around with it. And then shotguns just kind of suck. The Marine SP can be good in certain situations, but it's nowhere near any of the top SMGs as far as consistency goes. All right, so first we've got the new Kilo. This has been buffed to have awesome range, and then paired with the Kompakt. This loadout is probably going to be my loadout that I'm going to use. This has much better recoil now. So for the Kilo, since they buffed the range so much, definitely fine to go reinforced barrel and just use an optic. This build will end up having great range, great bullet velocity. After that, pretty standard build, monolithic, vertical foregrip, and mag 2. One option for this though is you absolutely can go iron sights and you can take off the optic and run probably over pressured for super fast bullet velocity, but also recoil springs would be a solid option too. You also could go 2x, 3x, whatever you feel comfortable with optic wise here. For the Kompakt, now the Kompakt is one that they buffed the recoil spring, so we want to make sure we use both that and the vertical foregrip on this one to really make the recoil much more manageable. We're going to give up using that stock, but it's not the end of the world. Ergonomic grip is what I use on all of my SMGs. Mag 3 on this one. And then the Kompakt is an interesting one that it has this integrated suppressor barrel that's going to keep it suppressed, but also add range and bullet velocity, which is really nice. And you get a little bit better iron sights. Now the Kilo is a gun that is nice to go gunfighter with. So if you do that, you can add something like ergonomic, heavy stock, and overpressured. You can also, again, change the optic. The ABR is still going to be absurdly good, especially at long range. So do not sleep on this thing, even if you're a rebirth player. And then the Ladra is going to be, you know, probably like, I think the Ladra might also be kind of that #1. It's really hard to determine what is, but the Ladra is great. This is the same build I've been using on the ABR for a while. I do like the RNK multi-zoom on this one, but you can go 2x, 3x, whichever you prefer. Monolithic gain twist, mag 2, and then recoil springs. I don't run vertical foregrip on this because the recoil springs help with the vertical recoil control, which this gun doesn't really have much horizontal, and the vertical foregrip only does horizontal. So that's why I like to use recoil springs on this one instead. And then the Ladra on this one, you can go reinforced or long barrel. It's kind of just, it's up to you really. Both are solid options. Ranger or vertical foregrip, depending on what you prefer there. If you want a little bit more recoil, a little bit more movement speed. Mag 2, ergonomic, and then infiltrator stock. And again, with SMGs, I like infiltrator for most of these, but balance stock is also a great option. I know a lot of people are always like, oh, use the no stock, it's got the best movement speed. Movement speed is not that important of a stat in this. Sprinting movement speed tends to be more important. This only buffs the movement speed, not the sprinting movement speed. Then the AMES 85, low recoil, fast fire rate. Absolutely love this thing, but the Kilo is probably going to outshine it slightly. And then the C9, again, C9, tried and true, great gun. The nerf is going to be barely noticeable. Only at mid range will you feel that nerf. For the AMES, if I'm running this on Resurgent, I like to go iron sight on this one. So I'll go overpressured with a reinforced barrel. But again, you definitely could take off overpressured, put on any optic of your choice instead. And then for the C9, again, pretty much the exact same setup as that Ladra. Again, you can interchange the barrel, under barrel, or the stock between those other options like I mentioned. If you want to snipe, the ASVAL is an insanely good sniper sport, probably my favorite overall. And then this is the Frostline. The Frostline, again, got a bullet velocity buff. It's always been a pretty solid option. So ASVAL, a few options to run this one. If you want it to be very low recoil, easy to use with an optic, I recommend this setup with an optic, vertical, mag 2, the full stock, and then recoil springs. But you also can take off the optic, swap the stock, and you can go ergonomic grip. and then something like the Infiltrator stock, and this will have a little bit better handling, kind of feel a little bit more like an SMG would. This Frostline build has 72 meters of one-shot headshot range capability and 1600 bullet velocity. So nearly hit scan. It's going to feel really, really nice to use. I think on Rebirth, it'd be a good option. Definitely one to consider using. And then Overpressured was that last attachment at the end. If you're an aggressive Rebirth player, FFAR has the fastest overall TTK, but it does have a good bit of recoil and it kind of struggles at range because of that. So because of the recoil, I will go compensator instead of the monolithic, and then gain twist, vertical, mag 2, and then an optic. Another option is you could take off the optic and put on something like recoil springs. You could then add the monolithic back on. But again, the recoil is kind of the big problem with this gun, that it's just not gonna, you're not gonna be able to hit shots like you can with, you know, guns like the Kilo or the ABR at long range. And then the AMAX, after its buff, is also going to be another really like hard hitting option to run on Rebirth. It's, you know, a lot of different ways to run it as well. I think the best option on this is to go an iron sight build, go compensator, gain twist, vertical, mag 2, and overpressured. This gets your bullet velocity up to 1500. If you need the optic, of course you could take off overpressured, put an optic on, but then that bullet velocity is not going to feel that good. It won't feel very good at range. And then kind of my sleeper pick SMG is going to be the Saug. With this build, the recoil feels so much better, and it does have a very, very competitive TTK. So I'm actually taking the barrel off on this one because they did buff the range. I'm going recoil springs and vertical foregrip, and then mag 2 ergonomic infiltrator. If you want a little bit better range, you want to sacrifice a little bit of mobility, you can take off the stock and then add back something like a reinforced or a long barrel to get some of that range back. And then another sleeper pick that I could see maybe a lot of the like top level players using is going to be the Jackal because of that buff it got. So the Jackal was another gun that got a buff to its recoil springs. And with that, one option that you can do is actually to swap the vertical foregrip for the recoil springs. Recoil springs on this gun are going to give a 12% buff to recoil gun kick and then horizontal and vertical recoil control. Whereas the vertical foregrip is going to only give you a 1% buff to recoil gun kick. So basically nothing, but a 20% to horizontal, but nothing to vertical. So I think with that added gun kick and vertical buffs, it does maybe make more sense to go recoil springs on this. After that, kind of normal build, reinforced, mag 2, ergonomic, and infiltrator stock. And then the KSV, really underrated. It's got really, really good range. This would be a good gun to pair on Rebirth Island with like a Kar 98. What the heck was that? That was a weird bug. What? I don't know what's happening. So KSV on this one, we're going reinforced, ranger, mag 2, ergonomic, and infiltrator. You could definitely swap this with a vertical foregrip. You could take off the stock for an optic if you wanted a more kind of true sniper support build. And then Kar 98, this is kind of your great, just all around aggressive type sniper. For the optic, I like the classic range collar. That's like the classic Kar sight, but a lot of people prefer something like the SPX 6.6. As far as tactical then lethals go, if I'm running ranked, especially Rebirth ranked, I love flashbangs. Flashbangs are so underrated. They're really, really strong to use against fights, but otherwise smoke grenades are still top notch, especially on Verdansk or in Rebirth. I don't really use stims anymore. They're only good in end game kind of gas play type situations, and normally I'll just try to loot them in that situation instead. For lethals, I love spring mines when it comes to ranked. They're just really valuable for like, you know, holding zip lines, holding doorways, stuff like that. But if you're playing pubs like Rebirth, I normally just go throwing knives if you're a really aggressive player. For most players, probably using something like Semtex, impacts, or frag grenades are going to be really good. You just can't use impacts in ranked. And then also thermites are a solid option as well, especially against vehicles. For my perks on Rebirth Island, I love Mountaineer. Mountaineer is really, really underrated for Rebirth, but it's not as useful on Verdansk. On Verdansk, really like Scavenger. Survivor is really solid as well. Reflexes isn't bad. Veterans okay. With perk 2, I will pretty much always go quick fix. However, if I decide to run Survivor, you should not run quick fix. Survivor kind of does the same thing in a way as quick fix, so you don't want to run both of them. So if I was going to run Survivor, I would take this off. And, you know, in pubs, Tracker is phenomenal, but you can't run it in ranked. Quartermaster is like Restock is really solid. Bomb Squad is really, really nice, especially in ranked or Verdansk where people are, so you can see through the enemy prox mines and stuff. And then perk 3, I am pretty much always going Tempered. I will say Verdansk Ghost is really nice, but Tempered is just such a good perk. Alertness just not that good, and then normally you can loot Gung Ho. So yeah, just not really worth using because you can loot it often. And then of course, wild cards, I'm pretty much always going to go overkill, especially on Rebirth Island. On verdansk, I will often go gunfighter AR off the rip and then just use like a whatever good ground loot SMG I find. If that's the case, I will go usually like ABR or Kilo gunfighter. So this would be my ABR gunfighter build, which I think I forgot to show. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap things up. Hope you found it helpful. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, come check out a stream here on YouTube. Make sure to thank Harry for those TTK charts. See you in the next one.